Rob McDonald with NorCal Beat, and Jim Reed's here to show us how he's going to get around our district to represent us better.
You know, our first congressional district is a really diverse district with people with different concerns. Reading, the people have concerns in Reading that are much different than the people's concerns in Chico, which is different than Auburn or Grass Valley. And it's important for a congressional representative to get out with the people and actually talk with them and see what's important about what's important to them, so that you can properly represent them. An airplane is really going to be the only way that I can see enough people to truly represent all the people of the district. So we're here in Fall River Mills, and in the front yard of my house with Fall River, as you can see in the background. Lived here now 18 years. My parents lived in Fall River before that, and my grandfather before that, so I'm third generation Fall River Mills. Have been an attorney here in town. Always kind of felt that I was an asset of the town, because there's not a lot of attorneys up here, as you can imagine, and so the town really needed somebody to provide legal services, and I've done that, including a lot of charitable work. A little bit later, we're going to see some of my animals, two of which are llamas. That turned out to be a fee for doing a will for somebody. My wife wasn't real happy about the fact that we took llamas in exchange, but that's the way it works. But anyway, decided to get involved in the congressional race 2 years ago, and feel that our country really needs somebody to represent this area of the state. I feel that we haven't really had adequate representation over quite some time now. Some of the really important issues that I think are out there is we're in a world where we've got to balance the budget soon, but there's different ways of doing that, and the version that we've absolutely got to avoid is drastic cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We can balance the budget and keep those programs intact. We need a balanced approach. I believe the Simpson-Bowles study gives a balanced approach, and I think that's the method we need to follow to be able to balance the budget. I do a lot of tax work. I have a degree in taxation, master's degree in taxation, and I've watched the tax system develop to be really an unfair system over the years. And I bring that knowledge with the knowledge that, or with the understanding, I should say, that 2013 is going to be a year where we really need to do tax reform. There are so many tax loopholes that are there for special interest groups that don't deserve them. Our system has become so complicated, we need to simplify it. And the highest income earners get a tax rate generally that's lower than people that work for a living. I always like to point out that Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. If you're a single taxpayer and you're earning more than $34,500 in a single year, anything above that you're paying at least a 25% tax rate, where somebody who's making their income from dividends and capital gains, which is where most wealthy people get their income, they're paying at only a 15% tax rate. And I think that's unfair. It discourages people from working hard for a living. So I bring that knowledge, and I would love to be in Washington, D.C. to help straighten out our tax system. And as I say, 2013 is the year that we really need to do that.
Awesome. You're trying to take the seat now held by Wally Herger, and your opponent's Doug LaMalfa. And Jim, tell us the difference between the two.
Well, first of all, when Wally Herger, who I ran against in 2010, I expected to be running against Wally Herger again, and to my surprise, he decided to retire. When Wally Herger decided to retire, he, after being in office for 26 years, wanted to continue with the same policies and chose Doug LaMalfa as his replacement. Mm-hmm. And there were 8 of us that ran in the primary, but with the new system, the top 2, of course, go to the November ballot. That was Doug LaMalfa and me. Now there's some really substantial differences between Doug LaMalfa's philosophy in mind. And as a starting point, I like to say this. I believe that a congressional representative must lead by example. And so you've got to, if you're standing for certain policies or philosophies, you've got to live that yourself. And that right off the bat is one of the big differences between Doug LaMalfa and me. Doug LaMalfa has had a very consistent record of wanting a smaller government, less spending. He actually has voted as an assemblyman and now as a state senator to a fault in that regard. To me, it shows in certain instances a lack of compassion. You've got to be prepared to come off your basic philosophy if there's a really good reason to do that. And there's been instances, for instance, back 7 or 8 years ago when we were in a drought situation and our farmers were in desperate shape because of the drought, Doug LaMalfa voted against giving those farmers any sort of support or relief, even though it wouldn't have been that costly for the state of California, but because it was an expansion of government, some more spending involved, he voted against it. And that just, to me, shows a lack of compassion.
Did his family that year take their money not to grow food? And
yeah, that really is where I'm kind of heading with this discussion, because if smaller government and less spending is your philosophy, I don't believe you should be taking government subsidies, and especially to the degree he and his family have taken it. I think it's $4.7 million over the last few years that he's actually gotten in subsidies for not growing rice.
Yeah. Well, the price support system is basically so that farmers can make money at still growing, and if there wasn't a price support, everybody would grow, and the following year no one would be able to grow. But at the same time, we're giving away every single year money for people to do nothing.
And that's the point. To some extent, to have stable prices in our commodities, some sort of support system, I think, is necessary. And as you say, if you don't have it, all the farmers will be growing one crop one year, and prices will fall because of that, and then the next year they'll switch to something else. We need a more balanced approach. And the subsidies do that to a certain extent. But from my point of view, the big corporate farmers don't need that support. These ranches that have thousands of acres, and Doug LaMalfa's ranch is one of those, I don't believe really need those subsidies. The smaller, let's say 160 acres or less, those are the farmers I think should be getting these kind of subsidies. Now, you may not be aware of this, but my understanding, and I haven't actually verified this to be absolutely true, but I've heard it from enough sources that I believe it to be true. There's a maximum amount that a rice farmer can get as a rice subsidy each year. And what I understand happened is Doug LaMalfa and his family gamed the system by dividing their 2,000-acre ranch into 6 separate ranches. And they had a little bit of, the title to the ranches were in a little bit different names so that they qualified. Nothing illegal about that.
Right.
But at the same time, it is gaming the system. And to me, if you're trying to lead by example, this is a really bad example.
Yeah. Well, is there any other differences between the two of you?
Well, there are major differences, and I could go through them one by one, but what I find from an overall standpoint is I'm a person that wants to get things done. And I have certain issues that I think are important, but I realize sometimes you have to put these issues on hold in order to get other things done. And what I've heard from or looked at from Doug LaMalfa's record is he's a person that says no to anything. He's not looking to compromise. He's not looking to actually move things forward. If I have, let's say, 3 issues that are really important to me, and I can get one of them done by putting the second and third issue on hold for a year or two, I will do that rather than losing on all 3 issues. And the other thing is, if you look at certain issues, you'll find that Doug LaMalfa's position are pretty extreme. I'm a middle-of-the-road type person. I think the majority of people are in the middle of the road that like to see things not too extreme. But let me just point out two issues that Doug LaMalfa has voted on that I think show how extreme he is. First is the abortion right to choose issue. I'm, again, middle of the road on that issue. I do not like abortions. I would discourage anybody who came to me thinking about an abortion. I would discourage them from doing it. But at the same time, I don't want to take a woman's right to choose away from them. Doug LaMalfa has taken the anti-abortion position to an extreme. He voted once where the mother's life is at risk to not allow an abortion. I have a daughter. I could just imagine being in a position where my daughter's life was going to end as a result of a pregnancy, and I just cannot imagine having her life come to an end because abortions are illegal. So that to me is just a really extreme case, and there are other things.
Well, I feel like the Democrats aren't pro-abortion like the Republicans make them out to be. They are pro-choice.
Pro-choice.
Which is more of a freedom, and the government doesn't have a right to decide for you what's going to affect the rest of your life.
Even people that I talk with that are very strong anti-abortionists, they will usually say there's some exceptions. They'll say, you know, if it's a case of rape or incest or where the mother's life is at risk, in those cases they would be willing to allow an abortion. But as I say, we're in the extreme case where a mother's life is at risk. To me, that is just going too far.
Yeah.
Now, one of my major issues is making sure we save Medicare in the basically in the form it is today. And Medicare is underfunded, and there's going to have to be some changes. We're going to have to find some revenue to help shore up Medicare. But there's one real problem with Medicare that needs to be fixed. And that is that a very high percentage, and I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but a very high percentage of Medicare expense is paid in the last 2 weeks of people's lives. Extremely expensive treatment to try to keep these people alive, and of course normally it doesn't work. Now, I believe that the doctor who is the physician in charge should have a frank discussion with the person, talk with the person about alternatives. Do they really want to go through the pain of this over-medication in the last 2 weeks of their life, even though the chances of saving the life are slim? Or do they want to be given a choice to, let's say, unplug the life support and be able to die naturally and painlessly? And as an attorney who deals with estate planning, I talk to people all the time about advanced health care directives, and it's an important document to have, by the way, so that if you're unconscious or so sick you can't make your own medical decisions, you designate who it is that you want to have making those decisions for you.
Yeah.
Well, one of the key issues on that is, if you're terminally ill, do you want to have life support spending every last dime of the money that you have, or do you want to basically be unplugged? And I would say probably only 2 or 3 people I've talked with over the last 15 years said no, they want to have life support to the very end.
Yeah.
Almost everybody says they want to be unplugged if they know they're dying. Well, Medicare expense could greatly be reduced if we just allowed our doctors to have that frank discussion with people that are in that terminal condition. You may remember during the Obama health care discussion, there was a part of the plan that didn't. Part of the plan was to allow doctors to have this frank discussion with people who were terminally ill. And I think it was Sarah Palin who came out and said, well, these are going to be death squads. And of course, as a result of that publicity, which just generally was not true, that didn't become part of the act.
Well, it's no different than right now, Obama's going to take our guns away.
Yeah. But back to health care for a minute, we really need to put that in, because there could be a tremendous savings in Medicare expense if they had that discussion. Now, one of the things, and again showing that Doug LaMalfa is very extreme, there was actually a California bill when he was in the Assembly that would have paid for doctors to have that discussion with their patients. He voted against it. And to me, that is just extreme. why not at least let a person have a choice at that stage of their life?
Yeah, and well, I think people should always have choices over medicine. I just see a lot of cases nowadays where they don't. They're told that, well, people have been taken to court forcing them into certain treatments even.
Oh, that's the thing. You know, the people that I've done advanced healthcare directives for, they've thought this through. But the vast majority of people don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And so next thing they're in that position, they don't know what the options are, and unfortunately they die without ever finding out what those options were.
Or they may be incoherent and unable to make those decisions, and so the decision made for them is to keep them alive.
That's right. That's, in fact, that is the requirement. If they haven't clearly stated that they want to die without life support, the physicians must do everything to keep them alive.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I'm seeing is a whole lot of shooting going on, and every single time it happens, we see all this stuff come, emails, everything else, that Obama's going to take our guns away. Now, I have heard nothing like that from President Obama. I have heard nothing like that from the Democratic Congress. There are some people that are calling for it, but nothing within there. What is your view on our gun rights?
Well, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Living here in Fall River Mills, if somebody was breaking into my house, let's say at 2 a.m. and I called 911, it might be an hour to 2 hours before any police presence arrives. So my first line of defense is my gun. And I would hate to think of anybody taking away that protection from me. And so I'm a very strong supporter of gun rights, but you've got to be reasonable about this also. It seems like every couple weeks I hear of some child playing with a gun, shooting themselves or shooting their friends. I feel like if you're going to allow your child to have access to guns, it should be just like a driver's license. They should have to go through some sort of gun safety class before they're allowed to use this very dangerous weapon. It's certainly, a gun is certainly as dangerous as a car, and therefore I think it should be mandatory. If you're under 16 and you're using either a gun, a rifle, or a pistol, you should have training first.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind seeing just some basic training in like elementary school, for the reason that I have seen more gun accidents from kids that actually do know how to handle a gun, having their buddies over and showing it to them, and their buddy ends up shooting them.
That's right.
It's just, I think there's been 2 or 3 incidents like that in the North State just in the last 10 years.
And it's just really scary, and it's needless.
Yeah, oh, it is. I mean, every child should be taught right off the bat that if you ever do have a gun in your hand, you don't pull the trigger unless you intend to kill somebody.
So I agree with you, by the way, that I think our public schools should have a gun safety class, particularly in rural areas. Maybe in cities, maybe that's not so important. But out here, virtually everybody has a gun.
Yeah.
And so that means our children have access to them.
And they're going to come in contact with it even if their parents don't do it, just through their friends.
That's right. So having some sort of gun safety class as part of our public education, I think, is a really good idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, thank you for a great interview, and I should have this on by next week. But